Welcome to another episode of Pod for Good, a podcast where we learn from those doing good here in Tulsa, why they care, what we can do, and most importantly, what you can do. Pod for Good is produced and edited by Rant9 Productions. It can be found anywhere you get your podcasts. I'm your Chief Philanthropod, Jesse Ulrich.
And I'm your Vice Admiral Philanthropod, Chris Miller.
And today we talk to Andrea Pemberton, Executive Director of TYPROS.
We talked to Andrea about all things TYPROS, what drew her back to Tulsa, and she promised to bring In-N-Out to Tulsa next year.
She guaranteed it. Enjoy. We are very excited to have Andrea Pemberton on the podcast today. Andrea, hello.
Hi, Jesse. Thanks for having me.
You are the Executive Director, TYPROS. Was TYPROS always a program of the Regional Chamber?
It has always been a program. Chamber of Commerce, yep.
That seems like a much cooler program than the Chamber of Commerce would come up with. So that's why, even though I know your Chamber of Commerce wins awards and such. So
we definitely make the chamber look good. I think really the credit should go to us, but we'll let them have a little bit of it.
Who do we talk to about the fact that we think Boom should have won the Boomtown Person of the Year award over Bruce Darts?
Yeah, Jesse, that might be a tough hill to die on for you.
Listen, I think Bruce Dart should get his own award, the Bruce Dart Award, for being awesome in a year of a pandemic. But, still rooting for you, Boom. He's not going to listen. All right. Chris and I are both professionals who are still just barely considered young by the definition of your program. But for the people who don't know what TYPROS does or have heard the term, but don't actually know what the program is, can you give us a quick summation of what TYPROS is?
Yeah, just high-level overview. Well, as you mentioned before, we are a program of the Tulsa Regional Chamber. We've been around since 2005, and we have actually recently updated our mission. So I'm happy to announce our new mission is to make Tulsa an awesome place for young professionals to live, work, and play. And we do that through various programming that is targeted at making our city more awesome, that engages young people, that elevates young people in our community and connects them in meaningful ways around topics that young professionals are passionate about here in our city. So we're organized into 7 different work crews, as we refer to them as, but these are really just passion points that young people have. And they each meet monthly to have engaging conversations about these topics such as business development, government relations, diversity, urbanism, sustainability. And it provides a space for young people to enter into our city, to get connected, to get plugged in, and to meet members of their tribe who care about the same things that they care about.
Very succinct, and feels like it has been worked through on a multitude of committees and has been funneled down to that, and I like it.
So one of my favorite programs with TYPROS is the Get On Board program, which I think you're going through the process right now. It was my first way to get onto a nonprofit board as somebody who thought they would not, as a young professional, not in a position to actually serve on a board. So it was very impactful to me, and I've served on boards since then. But can you talk about that program, where you are in that process right now?
Sure. So the Get On Board program is an opportunity for young professionals to intern on local nonprofits. So they are non-voting, but they also don't have any legal or financial obligation. So it's really an opportunity for young professionals to have their voices heard and to learn more about how local nonprofits operate. And there's a selection process wherein applications are open. We do a kickoff event. Applications are open for 2 weeks. Young professionals apply for that, and then we select the top 30, and then we match make. So the different types of nonprofits and projects that young people are interested in, we take their interest and we take the skills and needs required by the nonprofits, and we place them in an internship for a full year. We're actually revamping the program this year. We're super excited to announce with Leadership Tulsa, New Voices, and with Junior League. And all of them already have nonprofit intern opportunities. However, we're coming together to basically create holistic training all together, which will help streamline the process. And then all of our nonprofits benefit from having highly skilled, highly trained individuals coming from all these different programs. We each just have a slightly different spin on it. Obviously, Get On Board, we're focused specifically on young professionals between the ages of 18 and 40.
And having served on both sides as the intern and then on a board trying to attract board members, we would often try everything we could to keep those interns on the board. And that's something that I think a lot of young professionals don't understand, is that nonprofit boards desperately want young people on their boards. And if it's something that, you don't feel like you have the connections to get onto a board or the training or the experience, it is a great low risk way to get started in that and find a way to plug into the nonprofit world in Tulsa.
Absolutely.
I'm definitely on 3 boards, and I'm the youngest person on all 3 of those boards. And that's why I'm there in the first place. Being on a board really shows you a completely different side to how nonprofits operate, organizations operate. And some boards do it well, some boards do not do it well. And it's good to be on more than one so you can see the difference, as I've learned.
Absolutely. As Wendy Thomas of Leadership Tulsa famously says, if you've been on one board, you've been on one board. So each nonprofit, runs differently. Some are more hands-on, some are governing. So having opportunities to sample without, like Chris mentioned, it's high access, low barrier opportunities for young people to experience it without necessarily having to fully commit. They can sample it first. And it's a great opportunity for the nonprofits to sample and do a test run before they commit to a board member. So
you've been working for TYPROS for a little under 3 years. From your LinkedIn page. Thank you, LinkedIn. Sponsor of Pop for Good. And before that, I noticed you were a math teacher. So I'm wondering, did you do Teach for America, or did you do another thing that taught you to be a teacher and then you taught for a year and then moved on to something else?
All of that, all the connections are actually really interesting. And part of it is very much my story with TYPROS personally. I actually moved to Tulsa 5 years ago to do City Year Tulsa, which is also an AmeriCorps program working in schools very similar to Teach for America. However, it is only 1 year. So during that year, that's what brought me to Tulsa in the first place. And my involvement as a volunteer with TYPROS helped me get connected in the community and with the city. And I fell in love with the opportunities that Tulsa provides for young people. So after that city year, I actually did a Fulbright in Israel for a year. And then at the end of that, I was a free agent, right? I wasn't in school. I didn't have a job. I could kind of go anywhere and do anything that I wanted. So I was applying to jobs on either of the coasts, really kind of looking into it. But it was my TYPROS family that kept messaging and reaching out saying, hey, it's time to come back home to Tulsa. And I was like, wait, Tulsa's not home for me. So I'm not sure what you're talking about, but they kept on insisting. And really the network that I had built here in just a single year really compelled me. And I said, all right, friends, that I will send you my resume. And if you guys can find me a job, I will come back to Tulsa. And the next day I got a phone call, and it was from Elsie Pollock, whose now husband was very involved in TYPROS, and that was the connection. So obviously, having been in education for the past several years, she's like, we'd love to have you. That's how I became a math teacher at Tulsa Honor Academy. Shout out to THA. That is a journey from Tulsa to Israel, back to Tulsa, and then working for TYPROS. What is it about Tulsa? Like, where are you originally from? And what about Tulsa, like, other than TYPROS, obviously, like, attracted you to the city? Sure. I'm originally from Mustang, Oklahoma, so I'm definitely an Okie through and through. And then moving here to Tulsa, I didn't quite know what to expect, honestly, kind of being around the OKC area. I thought that Tulsa had maybe like a better art scene. But I was like, nah, it's not as cool as OKC. I'm just going to go there for a year. I'm just going to do a service here, and then I'll figure out what's next after that. But really, the second that I touched ground here, just realized how easy it is to get connected in the city. There is a spirit here that everyone just outpours their resources, their time, their energy to help connect you. And all you have to do is ask. And sometimes not even ask. Sometimes you're just lucky and you show up in a place and you meet all these friends who are also super well connected, and they just share all of these networks and all these resources. And then I quickly found, through TYPROS, but also just through other opportunities in general, how easy it is to get an audience. Vertical networking here, honestly, is like a pretty flat thing to do. It's just as easy to get a coffee and an introduction with the CEO or the executive director of a foundation, or what have you, as just a peer. And I thought that was something that was really special about Tulsa, was that the access and the sense of young people don't have to wait their turn; they can make an impact right now. That was really, really appealing.
So speaking of foundations, I've always been a little fascinated with the connection with between TYPROS and the TYPROS Foundation. I know it's still relatively new, but how does that work? How does the interplay between TYPROS and the TYPROS Foundation work?
So in terms of strategy, again, placemaking is a huge facet of what TYPROS does. We want to help create and build the city that we want to see and make a physical impact on it. So the foundation really engages young people in placemaking, creative, innovative, community building projects. So it allows us to give out resources that engage young people in these projects. Essentially, the connection between the two, as the person who runs both of them, TYPROS throughout the year, we raise money and funds, especially through our annual Boomtown Awards, but also through pub clubs and other initiatives. So any funds that we raise go to the foundation, and then the foundation then grants the money out. And then we typically look for projects where we can get TYPROS members involved to help with as well. So really, it's a symbiotic relationship that creates a great name recognition and platform for TYPROS members and allows them to engage in some super cool projects. And often it's not uncommon for TYPROS members to apply for these grants and to receive them. So it's awesome. It's a pretty cool cycle.
Do you think, say, a really cool podcast would maybe be something that should apply for a grant?
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, thank you.
You should absolutely apply, especially because it's so placemaking and community building.
That's right.
Yes, I agree.
Well, one other thing, before you go, one other of your placemaking programs that used to be one of my favorite things to volunteer, and I assume it's still going on, is Street Cred, which I still think is largely responsible for some of the growth in an area like the Pearl District, some of the development in South Downtown, which was maybe one of the last ones that I volunteered with. But is that still going on? And how do you go about selecting where you want to have your Street Cred program?
Sure. Well, for those who are listening who are unfamiliar with Street Cred stands for community redevelopment. So essentially, TYPROS will select an area of town that maybe just needs a little TLC. Maybe it's been underserved, and we reimagine that space by pumping love, resources, time and effort, and volunteerism into that area. Typically in the form of a day festival. However, obviously this year it looked very different. We had a much smaller scale because of the pandemic. So we actually worked alongside the DCC, the Downtown Coordinating Council, and we did Street Cred in conjunction with Parking Day. So Parking Day is basically an opportunity for parklets and green space to reclaim the concrete jungle for a day. So we participated in that. And we held a parklet design competition, which allowed for local firms to submit designs, which actually was a great partnership with the Downtown Coordinating Council because they had recently gotten CARES Act funding to help businesses build parklets. So it worked out really well that this was an opportunity to showcase that. It falls right in line with the urbanist thinking of how do we reimagine spaces, right? How do we take a parking space and make it multifunctional and also support businesses at the same time? So the winning project for this year actually was a stationary bike parklet. So people could go out and work while pedaling. And that was submitted by This Machine and then Lahari Blurry, who is at the Urban Design Studio at OU Tulsa. It was a great way, again, to engage young people and thinking about what they want their spaces to look like. Much smaller scale this year. We're still working on hopefully finding a way to get that actually built. So it's not just a design, but can actually be utilized by Tulsans. But yeah, Chris, to your point, I mean, Street Cred really does have a legacy of helping develop and build and reimagine spaces. Another great example was the year before when we did Tulsa Art Alley. So right behind Elote downtown, there was a dingy old alley. Nothing was back there. It was stinky. There were a lot of dumpsters, and it was just an underutilized, unimagined space. And so Libby Billings and Kelly Cook came to us as a TYPROS Foundation grant, and they turned that into Tulsa Art Alleys. And now there are over 20 murals back there. People can stroll down. It's really reclaiming that space in an artistic, creative way. And then we did a Street Cred called Tulsa Art Alley, where we came in, we cleaned up the alley, we painted it, and then we celebrated it with the Street Cred. I
know that we are still, eventually we'll be able to know the timeline of this pandemic and what part of it we are currently in. But where we are now, what has TYPROS sort of noticed or sort of gathered information about how this has been sort of affecting the young professionals here in town? And
so throughout the year, we've sent some surveys out. We're trying to keep a pulse check on how it's affecting. Obviously, there is a huge paradigm shift happening in the professional work world, namely with remote work, and seeing what that looks like when when things go back to normal, are we going to continue to work from home? How do we engage with one another? What types of needs do young professionals have right now? At the beginning of the pandemic, it was, we want to give back. We're thankful that we have our job. We're thankful that we have resources. So what are the ways that we can support our local small businesses? Also, I'm bored. Please entertain us. We got creative with our programming. We initiated at the beginning of the pandemic, Takeout Tuesdays, where we selected a business and we encouraged all of our members to go and support that business on that Tuesday. We also engaged in some talent shows and virtual talent shows to engage young creatives. And we just found ways to help lift spirits, support our local businesses and entrepreneurs, and then just support our young professionals as this pandemic has worn on. So yeah, it's probably about time for another touch point to say, hey, friends, how we doing? Let's check in.
Actually, as I was leaving your house after dropping off the microphone this morning, I was thinking about, I'm like, okay, I had a moment when everything I was doing pandemic related seemed 100% normal. And I feel like that's a new phase when I wasn't even concerned, noticing that I was doing things that we've been doing during the pandemic. It just became what I'm doing now. And I was like, well, that's obviously a new phase for me, right? Everyone's been handling this differently. Everyone has different troubles. That's something I just noticed today. And I was like, oh, all right, this is how my brain operates now.
Yeah. We pick up habits pretty quickly, it turns out.
Yeah. Well, we could ask about our last guest, last week's guest, Kuma Roberts. I have heard that you don't like her at all and you wanted to air some grievances about her.
Yeah, really, if I could just take a moment to really
please do.
No, Kuma Roberts is absolutely my work wife. She, in so many ways, has been an amazing partner in terms of the work that we do. Her with Mosaic and TYPROS are both under the Community Development Division at the Chamber, which is literally made up of two, which is just me and Kuma. So when Jesse reached out, I was like, do know that you scheduled back to back, not only people within the chamber, but literally of the same division.
I knew the first part, did not know the second part.
Yes, which I'm surprised that you didn't get recount in the timeline of how Kuma came to her position. But yes, we are now under the Community Development Division. I actually just got off a meeting with her, right before we got onto this. So she wishes me luck and says hi to you both.
She's one of those people who I've seen on like Zoom things and have seen at meetings, but never actually got a chance to talk to. Who I sort of knew if we could just get her on the podcast, like we would have a good time because she seems a someone who cares about the work they do, but is also sort of just like themselves while they do it. And that's always fun.
She's the most authentic, real, and fun person. And I call it my humble honor to be able to work alongside her. I really am fortunate.
So both of your groups do have some similar missions, right? It is about, in a lot of ways about diversity, right? TYPROS, it is focused on young people, but that is part of the mission. So are you able to work together on any of your projects and programs?
Yeah, so I'm really glad you mentioned that because that was what our meeting was about today, was how can we be more collaborative and intentional with the programming that we're doing in the future. Before, it's kind of just been both of us cheering each other on with our respective programs. But this year, we're really set on, let's get these joint, opportunities and initiatives on the calendar so that we can partner together because, like you said, Kuma's focused on diversity from the entire spectrum, right? And TYPROS is really focused on this niche group of young professionals. But even young professionals, while we might have trends and how we think, how we behave, the types of things that we want, there's also a ton of diversity within young people. So we joke a lot that TYPROS is all things to all people because we kind of have to be to engage such a diverse group of young people. We have to talk about all different topics. We have to engage them in all different ways. So it definitely provides a lot of opportunity for creativity and super cool programming. So I'm very much looking forward to the work that we're going to be doing with Mosaic in 2021. So everyone stay tuned for sure.
You were telling me that this new division that you and Kuma are under it's new.
Mm-hmm.
And so what was the thinking about moving these two programs into this sort of one umbrella?
Yeah. So before we were workforce and education. So, and the lens from which we were viewing things was really more about attraction and retention of both young people, businesses, trying to develop an inclusive and prepared workforce. And I think the process, once the division, the restructuring happened, we really saw TYPROS as an arm of, yes, attraction and retention, but more of the community development piece. We we welcome people into our community. We give them places to plug in, to engage, and very much so the same with Mosaic, just focused on the topic specifically diversity and inclusion. So we are always out pounding the pavement day after day, reaching out to make connections with other individuals in the community to find ways that our programs can support them and vice versa. And so in that way, I mean, community development just made perfect sense for the type of work that we were doing. The chamber agreed and decided to put us into a division together.
But what happened to tourism? Wasn't tourism also with workforce earlier, at least according to one of Kuma's many jobs?
So different division has always been different, but we also work closely with them on different projects as well. Yeah, they're on a separate section of the chamber offices if you ever make it to if we ever go back to the offices.
That's true. Was there a time when you were interim executive director when you were like, I would like to be vice president of TYPROS?
You know, I really should have pushed for that, frankly. Vice president of Young Professionals and TYPROS.
Yeah, or just like vice president, TYPROS.
Yeah, honestly.
I'm all about commas and job titles these days.
Although I like vice president of Young Professionals. Just they don't have to even be in Tulsa, just young professionals everywhere. Yeah, you're the vice president of all of them.
Well, I feel like in that case, there needs to be a president of that, though, right? It just feels like you would have someone as president of that.
Oh, boom.
So she yeah.
There you go.
That's Jeff,
for that for sure.
Yeah.
to make amends for him.
Yeah, that's right. To make amends for the injustice.
So, Jesse, speaking of interviewing, you've been interviewing people for Tulsa Remote. Have you seen many, if any, of the Tulsa Remote participants showing up in TYPROS? Seems like some of them would also want to plug in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, one of our incoming leaders for next year, our volunteer leaders, is from the Tulsa Remote program. Jackie, shout out to Jackie, she's great. And no, it's a great opportunity for engagement. I think Tulsa Remote does a fantastic job of building a community within the organization. So TYPROS, again, is just that one piece that hopefully will help give them opportunities outside of the Tulsa Remote cohort to engage with other young people in the city. So yeah, we see a lot of Tulsa Remote people, and we're always really excited to have them because they are bringing great, fresh ideas, new enthusiasm, new energy, and it's always a delight to have them involved in our programming. And so we're excited that program is expanding. And listen, if they're bringing in all the young people, we will gladly get them plugged in. It's a very symbiotic relationship that way.
Because of my weird Tulsa work history, I don't know if it's this way in Tulsa, but I feel like it is, as it is in other cities, which is that there's currently a sort of ceiling that young professionals hit in certain organizations, and they have to stay there while anything above them, like there are people still in those jobs, and those people stay for a very long time. And so there's both like title and salary problems that come up. And like, have there been conversations within TYPROS of like, what to do about that here?
So it's a really interesting question. And again, I think to some extent, we're seeing a little bit of a shift in that. I think we're seeing an expansion of young people embarking out on other opportunities and also forming their own, becoming entrepreneurs, creatives. If there is a ceiling, I think young professionals are becoming less and less patient to wait their turn. So finding opportunities that will allow for high growth and to skill them up as well. So, and I mean, professional development that's provided by TYPROS hopefully will help individuals kind of make up that decision. We had a success series event just the other night where we just had conversations about what does success look like. And so much of that conversation was really focused around risk taking and deciding, if you're not happy in your job, if you feel like you're not growing, take risks while you're young. It's easier to do it then. So to embark and find your new passion project or to find a new company if the one that you're at is kind of keeping you there.
Between the two of us, Chris and I have worked for like 7 places, like 6 for me and 1 for him for most of our working adult life. Chris is at a place that has a system to reward people for good work, and eventually everyone becomes a vice president. Because again, who doesn't want to be a vice president?
That's right.
And there's senior vice president, which I don't. Are you a senior vice president yet?
I
feel like we've talked about this. Okay.
What happens from there?
Well, from there, there's a big gap to get to executive vice president. There's a very small number of those, like a handful of those. So that's a tough one. But maybe I could be senior vice president of Young Professionals. That would probably be an upgrade from where I am.
We're going to get you on the payroll for sure.
I'd like to be what's the president pro tem of Tulsa professionals.
Yes.
So
you want all Tulsa professionals, not just the young ones.
Yeah, well, because here's the thing. In Boston, I was very involved in a large project of the entire Jewish community there, which was getting young adults more engaged, right? And while I was involved in it, what was considered young went up by about 6 years by the time I left. And the reason for that is it wasn't actually about age. It was about where they were in their life. People who got married and then had kids, there were already programs and things to help them along that journey. What there wasn't was what to do to people who don't have kids, but who are still out and about and doing things and wanting to be engaged in a way that doesn't involve, that isn't geared towards their children, but geared towards them. And like I'm noticing on the website that TYPROS is inclusive of age, status, place of birth, and such what.
Is it the technical term? What?
It says, place of birth and comma, such what. Should probably change that. How does TYPROS handle the struggle that is, what does young mean anymore?
Sure. Yeah. So it's a good question. I'm glad you brought it up. We get asked it a lot. What qualifies as young? We say that for all of our programming, it's young and young at heart. We do cater to the age demographic of 18 to 40, and even within that, probably more explicitly from 21 to 40, frankly. But yeah, it's the age range where, if you attended college, you're out of college, you've probably moved to a new city, and creating the opportunity for young people to get engaged. However, we have all ages that attend our programming, and we welcome them because while the programming is geared towards young people, we need everyone's perspective at the table. And we love to have a diverse group of individuals who share in the same interests that we do.
Well, and I believe one of our dear friends, Andy Cagle, has refused to age out of TYPROS. So, shows that you can keep going even if you shouldn't still be there, right?
Absolutely. So we ceremoniously kick out in air quotes, members of TYPROS once they hit 40 with a glass boot full of beer. And that is how they get the boot. But we do also really strong alumni of TYPROS. We call them TYPROS XLT. I was telling Jesse earlier today, my organizational knowledge only goes back so far. I've only been in Tulsa for 5 years. So I'm calling on these individuals who joke all the time, I'm way aged out of TYPROS, but you have all of the insight and the intel, and you can give context for some of the things that worked in the past and why some things failed. And it really continues to help young people now. And honestly, at the end of the day, having such awesome community leaders who were a part of TYPROS and have now seen where their career is really exciting. And I think that connectivity of kind of the old guard of TYPROS and the new group coming in, that connectivity is really important, and it's super beneficial.
I feel like we need to get these people together and found TPROS, just Tulsa professionals.
Okay. I was like, what?
Well, because it's interesting. Like, it's not something that occurs to you when you're 25 or 30, but what happens when you sort of age out of the group that you sort of identify with? Like, I don't know how long I will have to have a job before I no longer consider myself a young professional, but it's going to be a while because Chris and I are both going to turn 40 in 2021. And when I was 20, I thought by the time I was 40, I would feel old, but I don't. So what does that mean now? Right? It's something interesting to think about. Not that it's important for us to talk about. I just wanted to say it out loud.
Hey, just keep coming to TYPROS events. We will gladly have you, regardless of what you're.
Chris, Andy, and I are going to be at everything.
That's right. Yeah. Although I will say, often when I wake up in the morning, I do actually feel rather old. So I have to warm up for a little bit, then I feel young again.
It does seem a little harder to get up off the ground than it used to. But
we're still young at heart. Young at heart.
Yeah,
right?
well, listen,
just not young of joint.
Yeah, certainly not. Yeah, or young of liver. So going into, we are in December of 2020. 2021 is coming soon. Thank God. Like, let's get this year over with. How much planning has TYPROS done for 2021, or is it still sort of waiting to see what happens with the coronavirus? Like, when the vaccine comes out, are you sort of keeping things as they are now?
So I'm glad you asked that. We have some things up our sleeves for 2021 that we're super excited about. And interestingly enough, we had talked for a while about, we're really, really event heavy. We just did a lot of events. And so since we can't gather people, what are the types of initiatives and programs that can make impact that don't require us to all be in a big room together? So some of the impact that we made just briefly this year that will roll into next year that were some of our successes in a crazy pandemic year was 918 Vote, which was our voter registration, education, and then get them out to the polls initiative. So over the course of the year, we registered over 1,400 new voters. We held information sessions virtually. We, in conjunction with other partners like the League of Women Voters, held the mayoral forum, which brought together all of the mayoral candidates so that people could watch that on Facebook Live. So really doing the work of, who can be in these spaces to inform and to educate, and specifically, targeting young people. And that's what we did. So we had to pivot. It wasn't in-person meet and greets. We had opportunities. We also threw an early voting block party. So at One Oak Field, when everyone was lined up, we brought out a DJ, we had pizza, we had I Voted masks, and we made, standing in line for a couple hours at least a little bit more enjoyable. And we really, pushed and drove for young people to get engaged, especially this year. What a critical year, right? That was something that we're really proud of. But that got us really thinking in the space of, initiatives and programs for 2021. The sky really is the limit. And we can start thinking in new creative ways outside of just kind of gathering in person, although we can't wait to get back to that too, frankly. But I will tease, you actually are the first to hear about a new initiative that TYPROS is working around the clock now to get out. So as a sister program to 918 Vote, we are creating a program called 918 Lead, where we are, it's a 4-month program that is helping young professionals who are political curious decide if, in fact, they want to run for elected office across the Tulsa region. So we'll be bringing in previous elected officials, current ones, to talk about, what does a day in the life of an elected official look like? What does the campaign look like? What do you need to know about running this before you dive head first? So we joke that we want it to be equal parts inspirational and equal parts terrifying, so that young professionals are informed about what this looks like, but that when they do decide, this is for me, that they feel a little bit more prepared. So we're super excited about that program. We're hoping, especially after a wild election year, frankly, that we will get more and more young people thinking about running for office, because 918 Vote, that's one part of our democracy. The other part is actually signing up and running for office and being in places of decision-making power.
With 918 Vote, did you work with another guest that we had on the podcast recently was Tommy Yap from the Tulsa Voter Van?
Yes, Tommy.
And I know he also did some programs around the early voting in One Oak. And he's also very young. So I assume he is TYPRO connected or TYPRO adjacent.
Yes, very much so. Yeah. Tommy, we, back in the before times, in February, when we had elections, not remotely, Tommy got super involved, and we worked through and created a notary base together. And really the work that he did, he and his partner we had an idea, we were sitting in our living room, and then, we decided to just make this happen and to see how much that program has expanded. And it's such a critical service that's needed. So, Tommy is an exceptional example of young people seeing a need and filling it by sheer willpower and some strategic partnering. So Tommy is a great friend of TYPROS, and we're super excited about all that he was able to accomplish in 2020 as well.
He definitely wasn't weighed down by years of disappointment in the system. And he's like, I'm just going to do this.
One of the things, and this is something that I used to love about TYPROS. And once again, I don't know if they're still doing this, but I was one of the volunteers that claim responsibility for helping get Trader Joe's here to Tulsa.
Thank you, Chris.
Welcome. But that was to me a really fun program. And I know there've been other similar things that TYPROS has done. So are they still working on similar things to try to get stuff brought to Tulsa similar to that?
Sure. So Bring It to Tulsa, our claim to fame for Bring It to Tulsa is Trader Joe's and Uber, which we famously brought to Tulsa. There have been some other kind of backroom conversations about other types of businesses or companies. We haven't really, obviously with Tesla for Tulsa, we were super excited about that project. And so helped with social media campaign, really trying to bolster the sense of quality of place, especially for young people for Tesla. So we were pretty bummed that we didn't get that, but we weren't leading the charge on that. So I'm excited in 2021 to revamp and to reimagine. We do still kind of have this master wish list that Tulsa has had for many years of different companies that they would like to see here. But also just with the change in the economy and the change in the types of professions, there's a lot more opportunity to bring in startup, mid-level, tech industries. which I think has not necessarily been on people's radar. It's usually kind of like brick and mortars. So having more service driven, bring it to Tulsa opportunities, I think is probably where we're going to pivot next. In addition to, I know Aaron Belsley had mentioned this on his podcast of Tulsa Remote, direct flights has always been something that we're trying to push for as well. So stay tuned to what we have in 2021. Hopefully we'll get another big, wish list out, and we'll start going after some of those companies.
So what you're saying is In-N-Out Burger in Tulsa in 2021.
Jesse, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
In-N-Out.
On the record. Yeah.
IKEA.
Yeah. No, please, God, no. Please don't do that.
Is that
to
one
me.
of those things that you want until you get it?
Right.
No, I've never wanted it, and I never liked going.
Although we have had conversations about TaskRabbit, which apparently is like a subcompany of IKEA, and that we don't have a TaskRabbit here. And it was actually a Tulsa Remote person that brought that as like, it's in every city, but it's not here. So I don't know. TaskRabbit, we can sponsor this podcast and come to Tulsa.
Listen,
there you go.
TaskRabbit, email me. You can find it. IKEA, never. IKEA and Pier 1
keep your
never sponsors of anything. Yes. They stopped serving the pretzels, which was just another slap in the face to me. Anyway, not a fan of IKEA's stores or furniture. Anyway, moving on.
Wow. I didn't realize IKEA was such a trigger for you, Jesse.
So Tulsa's great, and Tulsa has many positive qualities, but it also has infrastructure or base issues that we have to deal with to help to help move us to the place we want to be, whether it's the funding for public schools, whether it's road construction, whether it's the inequity of Tulsa as a whole. Like for you, what do you see as like, not like if we fix this one problem, we'd fix everything, but what is the thing that you're noticing the most of right now?
All of that and then some. I think from an infrastructure standpoint, river development is going to be critical for Tulsa. And I'm excited to see that there are some moves finally being made on that after, decades and decades, especially with, projects like the Great Raft Race, Seth Erkenbeck, shout out, that have really kind of highlighted the need and the underdevelopment of the river. Unfortunately, a lot of the things Tulsa is bound by are at the state level. Some people ask me, what's the worst part of Tulsa? And I say Oklahoma. And this is coming from an Okie who loves her state. But in terms of, policy, sometimes it can hold back our progress. In terms of kind of the social space, there's a lot of good work being done for small entrepreneurs. Obviously, huge setback with the pandemic. But I think where Tulsa has a lot of room to grow is frankly in the equity space. I think that a lot of companies and people are starting to get on board for understanding that, yes, Oklahoma has a reputation. Perhaps Tulsa does or doesn't. I think some people have either no opinion of us or perhaps a slightly negative one. So we can really work on branding to drive the uniqueness of the city. But at the same time, we have to create a welcoming and open space for a diverse group of young people and people in general. I mean, it just has to happen. And it takes effort. It's not, just inviting diverse groups of people to move to our city and then expecting that they'll just plug in automatically. It takes curating, and it takes making sure that all of our organizations and businesses are on board to be able to support them in a meaningful way and help them get connected and to see the growth and the flourishing that happens from there.
Earlier on, and we stopped doing this, we've sort of been asking people like how they've been handling this. But after a while, everyone was just handling it, right? So there was less issue about like how to do this, how to do that, because we've all sort of figured out ways of doing it. But what I do like to know, and I think people are interested in, is during this. Well, first of all, I have two questions. Going back here. First question: when we're talking about politics, are you a Veep, Parks and Rec, or West Wing politics type of person? Or none of the above?
Oh, y'all. I'm like a watching the city council on Wednesday night on Facebook Live type gal. So I don't know.
Okay, so you're a Parks and Rec person.
That sounds Parks and Rec, sort of. Yeah.
Yep.
And I've seen some of the seasons, but I didn't, fully commit. But people swear up and down that Veep would be my show. I struggle at this point to get into any shows that are like seasons and seasons and seasons long, because that's just a commitment that, I thought even in the pandemic I would be able to commit to, but I'm like, this is just going to suck me in, and I gotta be productive elsewhere. So
who is your favorite recurring character on the city council meetings?
Yeah.
oh man, we have just such good ones. And truly the complete and utter normalcy of it, school board meetings as well. I should point out, it's not just
really?
city council meetings. Yeah,
I did not know that.
Yeah. Very prolific, showing up to all. That's the engagement that I aspire that every person has, to make a comment for every proposal. Mm-hmm. We should all be that engaged.
Yeah,
that's right.
The Tulsa Public School board meetings have been going like record lengths, and like I always want to check it out. And I'm like, then I see when it's over, it went on for 8 hours. I'm like, I'm good. I don't need to watch that 8 hours now.
Yeah. Listen, I don't envy a single person in position of power and leadership right now. It has been just an insane year. And, to some extent, darn if you do, darn if you don't, there's going to be frustration regardless of what choice is made. It has been encouraging to see us moving in the direction of being mindful that we are in the middle of a pandemic, and therefore we should be doing things to mitigate that. The toss-up between the economy and public health. I mean, it's a hard decision that's being made, and especially from the school board perspective. I don't have kids. I can't imagine being a parent in the middle of this. So shout out to the parents. Y'all are holding it down. Much love to all of y'all. But the quickest way for us to get back to normal is for us to get the pandemic under control. And the truth is that we need strong leadership to make that happen. Again, our hands are tied in so many ways that even if we do it at the city level, even if we do it at the school board level, to some extent, we do need, statewide mask mandates. We do need policies in place at the state and federal level that can help us manage this.
You can admonish Broken Arrow, right? Broken Arrow, you're wrong. Get your shit together.
It's so frustrating. Have you seen the meme with The Simpsons all in the car?
Yep.
And, yeah. Broken Arrow.
I shared that too with you, Jesse, didn't I?
Yeah, you did.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Since you haven't been binge watching shows, what activity have you been doing that's sort of been your connection to culture, your pop culture comfort food, as we've been calling it?
I do have to preface that I have been, MasterChef has been on the background for, the last several weeks. It is not, MasterChef can be on the background. I can't commit to a sitcom or a show like that. I have to follow all of the storyline. MasterChef, whatever, like you burn the food or you don't. So that is one piece. But getting back into reading, has been a surprising joy of this pandemic. And also, y'all, I'm not like a nature girl. Like you don't really find me outdoors all that often. I truthfully prefer to be inside.
I'm with you. But
have taken some strolls around the block, and it's really a stir crazy thing of like I have to get out of my house, whereas before, I had options to get out. So yeah, I guess reading and taking walks around my block.
So what kind of stuff have you been reading?
Really all kinds. Honestly, I've recently gotten back into. This sounds so silly. YA, like young adult novels. I read the series of The Giver, mostly one because fifth grade math teacher. I love reading the books that my students are reading. That's the excuse I'll say. But also to support local bookshops like Eleanor's bookshop over at Mother Red Market. Go check them out. So some young adult novels, and then honestly just kind of anything I get my hands on, are recommendations that I've had. I'm currently reading by Moshe Hamid. It's The Reluctant Fundamentalist. I loved his book Exit West. It was whimsical. It was tragic. It was unflinching critique of immigration. So I mean, there's all types of stories that I'm into. If you guys have any recommendations, I will gladly take them. I am on a reading kick right now. So send me your lists.
Well, before we wrap up, we want to give a chance. How can people connect with TYPROS? What are some things they should be looking forward to? Give us your last little pitch, your plugs for TYPROS.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously you can always go to typros.org. We have an events calendar. You can follow us on social. We're on Facebook, we're on Insta, and we're on Twitter. We also have a LinkedIn group that you can join. So there's some great ways to get involved. Sign up for the newsletter. It has all the great information week over week. Other ways to get involved, on our website, each of our crew leaders have their information. So you can just email them directly. They're super affable, wonderful, amazing, talented people, and they would be more than happy to get you plugged into their particular initiatives. And if you really want to dive headfirst in, you can also find me on the website, send me an email, and I will get you added to our TYPROS Slack workspace, which is where the real magic happens, y'all.
Wow.
So this is some of the ways to get involved. And then until we get back in person, our virtual meetings are happening. So feel free to hop into any of those that are interesting to you. And hopefully we'll be back in person relatively soon. Of course, be on the lookout for 918 Lead that will be launching January of next year. Applications for that will open about mid-January. At any point, I'm open for a coffee. I'm open for, any just chit chat about how to get involved or plugged in. I'm happy to meet all the young people in our city and to find out what their passions are and to make it happen for them.
Awesome.
Andrea, thank you so much. And, hopefully your holiday season is both safe and enjoyable in however way people do things these days.
Same to you all. Thank you so much for having me and for getting to talk about young people in Tulsa. What a fun topic.
Thank you all for listening to our conversation with Andrea Pemberton. Please make sure to check out TYPROS on all of the social media channels. And speaking of social media, please follow Pod for Good on Facebook, Instagram, and the Twitter. And of course, please subscribe and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts if you can. And as always, Tulsa, get it done. And please, for the love of all that is holy in this world, wear a mask.